Perhaps the biggest contribution to NASCAR's rise in popularity in the 80s and 90s was its drivers. Names like Earnhardt, Petty, and Waltrip became famous and carried the sport to new heights. But over time, the sport has lost its driver personality. Today we'll look back in NASCAR history to find out how and why. Before NASCAR was popular, before it was ever even televised, it had some of the toughest drivers in the world. The roots of the sport were naturally cool. Former Prohibition bootleggers looking to use their modified cars to win money. These drivers courageously raced incredibly dangerous cars on tracks like Daytona Beach and Darlington. And when they flipped and caught fire, sometimes they would just put out the fire with their shirt, like Junior Johnson.
Johnson in 75. There's a fire under the hood. He's really modified this number 75. He'll need a new car and a new shirt.
Fast forward to the late 1970s. From the moment NASCAR entered the mainstream, it was led by its drivers. The first nationally televised Daytona 500 saw one of the greatest finishes in NASCAR history. Donnie Allison and Dale Yarborough aggressively beat and banged down the backstretch on the last lap, then crash and fight.
He slides! Donnie Allison slides! They hit again! They drive in the turn! They're hitting the wall! They're head on the wall!
All while Richard Petty awaits and snatches his 6th Daytona 500 win.
It is in third. Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front. At the line. Waltrip to the inside. Petty wins it.
The personalities of these brazen drivers instantly attracted millions of fans to the sport overnight and put NASCAR on the map. Without the 1979 finish and fight, NASCAR would not be what it is today. The 1980s saw the rise of NASCAR's greatest personality, Dale Earnhardt. The Intimidator was one of a kind. He would do anything to win a race. Pass you in the dirt.
72. There you see Bodine in the 5. He gets trapped on a slow car. And as he gets trapped in the slow, Earnhardt just drives around in the dirt.
Goes through
Now
the
let's
dirt.
Run you up the track. Clean his windshield while driving. Then, after the race, he would be completely honest and tell it like it is in his interview.
Well, that was something else. You know, Bill spun that 95 car out and caused a big mess, and then he come up there and tried to spin me out twice. I didn't take it.
But it wasn't just Earnhardt. Jeff Bodine, Bill Elliott, and Darrell Waltrip all were huge competitors in this time, and played a part in the rise of the sport. Bodine was another tough driver like Earnhardt. Elliott was the nice guy, fastest man alive, and the fan favorite.
There was no doubt that Bill Elliott was going to win.
And he is in a zip code of his own, which is where he was so many times during that entire season.
And Darrell Waltrip was Darrell Waltrip.
The 19th different winner of the Great American Race.
The 1990s saw the continued dominance of Dale Earnhardt, rattling cages several times throughout the decade.
Didn't mean to really turn around, meant to rattle his cage over.
But in this decade, a new driver entered the scene and made for a compelling villain. Jeff Gordon was the perfect bridge between old school and new school. He was dominant, talented, and self-made just like Dale was, having worked his way up from nothing. Few drivers could compete with Earnhardt. Only one could match up with him as a rookie, and that was Jeff Gordon. Their rivalry was one of the greatest in the history of the sport, but it never went too far. No matter how many times Earnhardt would call Gordon dumb,
He ain't too smart.
he would always show concern for his safety, and be willing to joke around in an interview with him.
Wonder Boy's here.
I hear him talking about me.
Joke like a little girl.
What? I'm sorry, man. I'm just not as big as you. Not as big a man as you.
These two drivers led what was one of the greatest 7-year stretches in NASCAR history. The loss of Dale Earnhardt in 2001 was the first big blow to NASCAR, but for the most part, the sport initially recovered well. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was thrust into the limelight and became an almost instant legend. He even inherited some of that rivalry with Jeff Gordon that his father started. The fans cared so much about Dale Jr. that when he lost to Gordon at Talladega in 2004 under caution, fans became disgruntled and threw drinks at Jeff during his celebration. But it wasn't just Dale Jr. Unique personalities were everywhere in the sport. Kyle and Kurt Busch entered the scene in the 2000s as young and inexperienced drivers, and consequently both were prone to physical and verbal altercations.
It's a red car.
Jimmy Spencer?
Yeah. That would be what, the third or fourth time this year that they've tangled?
The Busch brothers had no filter throughout the decade, making them very polarizing, especially Kyle.
I got run in the back of and spun out down the back straightaway for absolutely no reason, and it was, a pretty stupid move on his part.
Speaking of polarizing, Tony Stewart also became a top driver in the 2000s. Some would describe Smoke as a hothead at the time, but there is no denying he provided some of the best quotes in NASCAR history.
If we haven't crashed at least 50% of the field by the end of the race, we need to extend the race till we at least crash 50% of the cars, because it's not fair to these fans for them to not see any more wrecks than that and more tore up cars. I mean, we still had over half the cars running at the end, and it shouldn't be that way.
Polarizing drivers were exactly what NASCAR needed to keep the sport popular in the absence of Dale Sr., and that's exactly what they got. The 2010s was when NASCAR's personality began to truly die. The seemingly obvious cause for this was the retirement of legends like Dale Jr., Jeff Gordon, and even Matt Kenseth. But there was a far deeper problem for NASCAR. Both its prime-aged drivers and young guns were becoming far more filtered. As the Busch brothers, Kevin Harvick, and other veterans mellowed with age, no young drivers were bold enough to really make a name for themselves. Instead of developing interesting new rivalries, we got drivers like Kyle Larson, Austin Dillon, and Ryan Blaney, who all avoided conflict for the most part. And how can you blame them? Sitting back and learning while being calm and collected is probably in their best interest, as less controversy will prevent sponsors from leaving and keep these drivers in good standing with their team owners. The problem is that by the 2010s, young drivers now recognize the business side of NASCAR. They learned from those that had made mistakes in the past to simply follow the etiquette and keep their heads down while they honed their racing skills. That's great and all for the driver, but as a fan, nobody wants to see all 40 racers agreeing on everything each week. There needs to be that clash between aggressive straight shooters like Dale Sr. and nice guy racers like Bill Elliott. The closest we got to that in the 2010s was the 2015 feud between Joey Logano and Matt Kenseth. Logano spun Kenseth for the win at Kansas, then a couple weeks later, Kenseth wrecked Logano at Martinsville in retaliation.
Caution comes out and the crowd roars!
This altercation met half the requirements. Matt Kenseth was the nice guy racer who felt he was wronged. On the other hand, Logano was aggressive and brazen, sure, but he didn't back it up off the track. He's never been a straight shooter, and he's even described himself as two-faced.
He blocks you a few times, and we raced hard, and he blocked me last time, and we spun out. That's what happened there. Here is just a complete coward move.
Additionally, his upbringing does not sit well with race fans. While guys like Dale Sr. had to win just to afford the next race, Joey Logano was born into money, and his family even moved just to support his racing career. Logano clearly did not make for a popular character among the working-class roots of the sport, and couldn't carry the weight of NASCAR's decline in personality. Today, boring drivers dominate the sport. William Byron, Alex Bowman, Christopher Bell, Chase Briscoe, and many others are fantastic drivers and savvy young guns, but they don't make for interesting drivers. However, NASCAR has one driver with the potential to become a star, Ross Chastain. On the track, Ross embodies everything that a NASCAR fan wants. He's aggressive, he's extremely courageous, won't back down from a fight, and he's consistently fast. Additionally, he's a self-made man, coming from generations of watermelon farmers in Florida, and working his way up through poor NASCAR equipment, using raw talent. The only place where Chastain loses many NASCAR fans is his interviews off the track. Instead of admitting his intentions and embracing the aggressive persona, Chastain constantly apologizes for his actions on track.
I wanted to push him up for sure, but definitely didn't want to turn myself in the wall.
This doesn't sit well with fans, who would rather the driver just own his actions and become that brazen personality of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. If Ross Chastain changes his interview style to be more genuine, he could become a household name and bring some popularity back to NASCAR. While it's in the best interest of the individual driver to keep his emotions out of racing, it makes NASCAR much less enjoyable to watch. It is up to the teams and the sanctioning body to display and encourage more personality out of the young drivers, many of whom have already shown great glimpses of it. A simple way to showcase these personalities could be to bring back After the Lap, NASCAR's interview with all the playoff drivers, which really gave the fans a chance to know them. Alternatively, NASCAR could look to the extremely popular Formula One which has a whole series displaying the drivers' personalities on their YouTube channel called Grill the Grid. NASCAR does similar videos occasionally, but posting higher quality versions more frequently would be a significant improvement. And of course, getting a serious NASCAR documentary series like Drive to Survive on a streaming service like Netflix would be huge and attract new fans. Let's hope that NASCAR can take the necessary steps to bring back personality to the sport. Thanks for watching, everybody.